The Suwałki Corridor is NATO's most vulnerable spot, and in the near future, Putin may attempt to invade this Achilles heel.
This is reported by the British publication The Sun.
We are observing an increased Russian military presence in Kaliningrad and Belarus. We are seeing sudden military exercises and unusual troop movements. We are facing a hybrid war with GPS jamming. There is sabotage of underwater vessels and little green men stirring up unrest among Russian-speaking minorities. This concerns the so-called Suwałki Corridor, about 100 kilometers long, which connects Poland and the Baltic states. Military analysts often describe this place as the most dangerous zone in NATO. If Russia and Belarus seize this corridor, they will cut off Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia from their European NATO allies. Anything that resembles a large-scale military buildup on the border with Ukraine just before the 2022 war should be interpreted as a serious warning sign. The movement of fuel, vehicles, and other military assets can serve as an indication of an impending invasion. The upcoming Zapad 2025 military exercises, which will be conducted jointly by both Russia and Belarus from September 12th to September 16th, will in part take place near the borders with neighboring countries. Poland and Lithuania. Military experts are urging close monitoring of these exercises, while NATO countries bordering Russia are conducting their own military drills. During the same period, the Terraces 25 exercises involve 10 Northern European NATO countries, and Lithuania is holding its own national defense drills called Thunderstrike. Poland is conducting its own Iron Defender 25 exercises, joined by 30,000 military personnel. We need to set difficult tasks for our troops and make them think outside the box. It's not just about getting to the training site and setting up camp. We need real challenges. Russia knows that if we are fully armed and ready for battle, they will definitely lose. So we won't be given the easiest conditions. We'll definitely have to operate under real pressure. The Suwałki Corridor is the only land route for NATO forces to Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. It is considered the alliance's Achilles heel due to its limited military potential compared to other NATO members. The Kaliningrad region and the Suwałki Corridor are considered potentially dangerous zones, as it is through them that Russia might attempt to block the Baltic states, on one side from the sea and on the other by land. It is possible that Moscow will use the Zapad 2025 exercises to test NATO's response to provocations. Moscow is ramping up the mobilization of the Russian population and economy. This is confirmation that the aggressor country is preparing for a possible war. With NATO, and the Suwałki Corridor is the most likely place for the confrontation to begin. Poland's closed border with Belarus is not a defense against mythical threats, it is a symptom of a serious illness. An illness called hysterical militarism. On September 12th, Poland completely stopped all traffic through all border crossings with Belarus. The restrictions apply in both directions. So I think this is just some kind of, well, how should I put it, provocation on their part. They provoke, they close the borders, and they also cause some minor mischief. They are simply provoking retaliatory actions. The Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zakharova criticized Poland's decision to close all border checkpoints. It is obvious that the confrontational steps taken by the Polish leadership serve only one purpose: to justify the policy of further escalating tensions in the center of Europe. We urge Warsaw to consider the consequences of such destructive actions and to reconsider the decision as soon as possible. Warsaw's decision was a direct response to the start of joint exercises between Belarus and Russia. Zapad 2025. We are conducting these exercises independently by our own decision, though not without regard to the countries to our west. This is about raising the level of training of our servicemen and improving the coordination between the armed forces of Belarus and Russia. We are doing this for ourselves to show that we are ready to defend ourselves and pose no threat to anyone. The exercises are planned to include practicing the planning for the use of nuclear weapons and the Oreshnik missile system. The exercises on the territory of the Republic of Belarus are being held at training grounds located deep within the country or in its eastern regions. Nevertheless, NATO remains on heightened alert because of these exercises. Just as the decision was made in 2020 to create a regional grouping, we are strictly adhering to the decisions of our heads of state. We hold these exercises every 2 years. The exercises will continue until September 16th. At the same time, NATO, Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia are conducting countermaneuvers. And all of this is happening close to each other with live fire and heavy equipment. We must clearly demonstrate the strength of the alliance, the strength of the Polish army, our relationships, skills, and capabilities. Previously, it became known that against the backdrop of Russian drone attacks, Poland is moving forces to its borders with Belarus and the Russian Federation. About 40,000 soldiers. 1 or 2 drones could have been considered a mistake, but the launch of the 19th from territory controlled by Russia was a deliberate attack on Poland and NATO's eastern flank. These exercises are considered among the largest and most important this year. They involve 600 pieces of equipment of all types from the Polish armed forces and NATO countries. Poland was preparing for the exercises. Zapad 2025 had been in preparation for many months. The Polish military conducted exercises involving more than 30,000 Polish and NATO soldiers to respond adequately. Not everyone understands that if Russia's provocation is not met with a firm response, it will happen again. Normally, we can reduce the likelihood of a sudden attack if we see unusual troop movements and deployments. But when all of this is disguised as an exercise, it becomes much harder to detect. NATO has been strengthening its defenses in this region since 2014. In 2020, US President Donald Trump and Polish President Andrzej Duda signed an agreement under which American troops in Poland were moved from a rotational basis to permanent deployment. Under this agreement, the number of US personnel was increased to 5,500 troops, and a decision was made to establish 6 military bases. In addition, the Pentagon re-established the 5th Army Corps of the US Armed Forces. Minsk is not pleased with its neighbors' exercises. Valery Revenko, Assistant Minister of Defense of the Republic of Belarus, stated that the actions of neighboring countries have begun to take on an increasingly aggressive character. What is most concerning is the decision by the Polish military leadership to form a group of more than 30,000 troops. This is already a serious group, in our opinion. They also don't like Lithuania, which is deploying additional air defense systems near the Belarusian border and increasing its training ground. In the pub. Intensity of training. We don't hide anything from anyone. We are truly demonstrating openness that these exercises are ours and are defensive in nature. And we are not planning to attack anyone, as some people seem to think. But that's their business. Let them think what they want.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The Suwałki Corridor is the only land route for NATO forces to Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. Military analysts often describe it as the most vulnerable spot and the most dangerous zone for NATO. As the events of 2022 have shown, after such exercises involving the Kremlin, the main threat does not come from neighboring countries, but from the territory of Belarus. After all, it was Russian troops that took part in the attack on Ukraine. The West remembers this very well. And this irritates the Belarusian military. Listen to how these savages are stirring up tension out of nowhere. They probably want us to respond to this in an appropriate manner. But I have already warned 1,000 times that we do not want any wars or conflicts. You accused Russia and Belarus of planning to invade. Yesterday you said we would invade Ukraine. We did not invade. So, your intelligence and the billions of dollars you spend are worthless. In recent months, Lukashenko has frequently met with foreign representatives, doing everything to show his loyalty. But it should not be forgotten that it is beneficial for Russia to keep Belarus independent as a kind of forward base in the West, through which it can demonstrate its strength if necessary. New threats and accusations. The Russian dictator is preparing for yet another war. Russia has always achieved results and has always emerged victorious from even the most difficult trials. Well, not always, to be precise. But for now, let's not recall the achievements of the great Russian army. In the past few days, Putin's servants have been making statements about a possible war. The former ALCO president, Dmitry Medvedev, has decided that Finland is preparing to attack Russia. After joining NATO under the guise of defensive measures, Helsinki is pursuing a confrontational course, preparing for war with Russia, apparently setting up a springboard for an attack on us. Moreover, according to him, Russia supposedly legally deserves reparations from the Finns for World War II. He claims that back then they paid far too little, thanks to the goodwill of the Russians. More delusions from the Kremlin drunkard Medvedev, who loves to reinterpret history, just as in general, Russia likes to rewrite it. To be specific, regarding any reparations, there were repeated consultations between Soviet Russia and Finland after World War II, during which the term Finlandization essentially emerged. In this arrangement, the Soviet Union did not demand any territorial concessions or reparations from Finland, and in return received a promise that Finland would not join NATO. But obviously, the situation has changed over time. Following the alcoholic Medvedev, the chairman of the State Duma Defense Committee, Andrei Kartapolov, also made aggressive statements. According to him, Helsinki's actions are supposedly extremely irresponsible, and the country's leadership is turning Finland into a hotbed of fascism. Germany is pursuing an extremely irresponsible policy, meanwhile guided by... And in fact, it is actually becoming a truly significant hotbed of fascism even faster than Ukraine. I feel truly very sorry for the Finnish people who have really endured so much and do not deserve this. The fate and the situation they find themselves in now is truly undeserved. Kartapolov also stated, or rather threatened, that Russia is ready to defend itself at any moment, since they have everything they need. Medvedev has also spoken about this earlier. We cannot overlook or disregard the important fact that, as of now, Finland is currently a member of the North Atlantic Alliance. This effectively predetermines changes in our military approaches to securing the border and to repelling potential threats or incursions. Unfriendly acts. If we recall the well-known phrase often attributed to Churchill that the fascists of the future will call themselves anti-fascists, then Russians are very clearly emphasizing the current ideology of their state by running around accusing everyone of allegedly supporting Nazi or fascist ideas. Of course, there are no concrete facts behind these accusations, but this kind of hybrid psychological aggression against Finland, these statements, show that Moscow is sharply escalating its aggressive rhetoric against Finland, the new NATO country. And all the accusations directed at it are a continuation of the Kremlin's well-known tactic of attributing aggressive intentions to its neighbors, thereby justifying its own militarization. If the Finns do not respond proactively to various kinds of provocations, if the Finns let the Russians get away with both hybrid attacks and information psychological ones, then perhaps in the future Finland will face similar cases to what we are seeing today with Poland. Specifically, with the incursion of a large number of drones, which can only be described as a deliberate plan, the Russians will also attempt physical, concrete operations on the ground in order to seize Finnish territory. Russia has long been building up its forces at the Finnish border. New tents, shelters for fighter jets, and warehouses are being constructed. In this way, the Kremlin is gradually preparing the ground for putting pressure on Finland. Finland is preparing a springboard for an attack on the Russian Federation. This was written by the Russian politician and alcoholic Dmitry Medvedev in a column for the propagandists at TASS, accusing Finnish President Alexander Stubb of pushing the country toward military conflict. Russia understands that, first and foremost, it is feared because of its unpredictability. Accordingly, it is necessary to put the most unpredictable representatives in the public eye. That's why we often hear statements from Zakharova and Medvedev, because these figures have been assigned the role in the Russian power system of being, so to speak, blunt instruments. Medvedev claims that Helsinki is pursuing a confrontational course, preparing for war with Russia. And it seems Medvedev believes they are preparing a springboard for an attack on his country. First of all, a joke comes to mind. He meant that he wants to attack them. But if we set the jokes aside, Finland shares a 1,273-kilometer border with Russia, and that's a land border. The maritime border, which also exists, isn't counted here. It's a line as well, on the Baltic Sea. Plus, Finland is a NATO country. It's also worth noting that Finland had no intention of joining NATO until Russia's aggression against Ukraine. The former president of Russia has identified Finland's allies as the NATO alliance, which, according to him, is supposedly fully involved in these matters and is now actively mastering land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace. Thus, in the immediate vicinity of the Russian border, according to Medvedev, a headquarters structure for the alliance's forward land forces is being established, and their numbers could be increased to a full brigade, 5,000 personnel. The report also mentions the deployment of a NATO land forces regional command headquarters in the city of Mikkeli and the establishment of a new garrison in the settlement of Ivolova, which is located 40 kilometers from Russian territory. Russia wants to restore not even the Soviet Union, but the Russian Empire. That is why it views Finland as part of the Russian Empire. It sees the Baltic states as part of the Soviet Union, or rather the Russian Empire. It even sees Poland as a possible, let's say, component of Russian greatness. But Dmitry Medvedev's fantasies and statements did not end there. He continued to look for enemies of Russia from abroad. It turns out that Russia's enemies are fighting not only with physical weapons, but also with biological ones, bringing them into Russia, along with non-native species of plants, animals, and microorganisms. No one cares that this disrupts the natural order. The main thing is to talk about it, to say that we are afraid of this, that they dream about it, that all they think about is how to seize our rich Russia. Medvedev noted that the spread of imported organisms leads to pandemics, allergies, the death of animals, crop losses, a reduction in forest and hunting resources, and also causes economic damage. Therefore, this problem requires careful attention from the state.